Hey everyone, welcome back to the Pack and Clint show here on Total Coverage Sports. Really appreciate you guys being here with us on another Tuesday. Clint and I are going to have a really loaded show for you guys today. We're going to be talking about some of the games that happened this week. We're going to talk about two of the best jobs that opened up, and we're going to be talking about who we think they should go after. What are the potential candidates? Who do we think they're eventually going to get? And then we'll head into the games that are this weekend. We're obviously going to be talking about the world's largest cocktail party, Florida, Georgia. We'll go and we'll talk about Oklahoma, Tennessee, a game that'll be in prime time. And then we'll talk about where college game day is going, and that's that's Texas versus Vanderbilt. So super excited to have you guys here. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet, follow Ghost's Twitter channel, Twitter page, follow the Total Coverage Sports page, and then go make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel because a lot of great content here. Before we get started, I got to ask, Clint, how was your weekend? How you feeling?
It was great, man. I mean, what a win that we got this weekend. And then we got a top 10 showdown coming to Austin. Finally get to go back to DKR, so very excited.
Yeah, it's been about a month and a half since Texas has been back in DKR, and a really, really hectic game last weekend against Mississippi State. In the fourth quarter, they were down by 17. I think it was 38-45, if my memory serves me correctly. Texas storms back, scores the last 24 points. Pretty much a season-saving win. Because if you lost that game, I think you're staring down the barrel of 6-6, 7-5, and you actually could get some hot seat talk with Steve Sarkisian, and you might even hope that he did go to the NFL, which is not something that I think anyone would have expected even 3 weeks ago. So a really big win for Texas. We're obviously going to be talking about that game, but what was your immediate reaction after Texas got that sack with Ethan Burke against Blake Shapen and ended the game? Did you have any immediate reaction? Was there anything that was going through your mind?
Yeah, so, I mean, start of the game looked very good. You have the 3-and-out. Mississippi State, the first couple of drives, was really trying to establish that run with Booth. They just weren't getting it, and two constant 3-and-outs. Then we get the big Ryan Wingo play and Arch Manning touchdown. It looks like it might be a blowout. Looks like it might be a dominating performance. Then you get stopped, and then they start to go more to the passing game with Blake Shapen. They start to really spread out the field more, and you really start to see those playmakers like Brennan Thompson get to work. And from there, it started to really go downhill. You're down 24-14 at halftime when Brennan Thompson burned Malik Muhammad on that straight go route. And then going into the second half, they get another touchdown. It's 31-14. And really, I'm just kind of, I would say, demoralized in a sense. And then you finally get a touchdown. You get that deep shot to Wingo, and then get the rope to Parker Livingston. And then they just go and get the 60-something yard touchdown with Booth on that shovel screen. So at that point, that was probably the worst I'd felt as a Texas fan since 2021, probably, because we hadn't seen us really get blown out. Obviously, we saw it against Georgia, but then we were 6-0. They were a top 5 team, and we saw our season ahead of us. But if we lose that, the season's over. Essentially, we're not going to the playoffs. You're just fighting for a better bowl game than you could get. And then when we started to come back, I honestly turned the game off for a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But we started to come back, and once Ryan Niblett got that punt return, you had all the momentum on your side. I had a good feeling we were going to win that game. And then Arch Manning, unfortunately, goes down, which we will get to this later regarding the Vanderbilt game. But Matthew Caldwell comes in, very poised, without much warming up at all, kind of came in at the last second, and threw an absolute dime to DeAndre Moore in the corner of the end zone. No, not DeAndre Moore, Emmett Mosley in the corner of the end zone. And Emmett Mosley was able to get that foot down just in time for us to get that touchdown. And my immediate reaction after that sack was just that was it was just an amazing feeling. It was an amazing feeling seeing that fight, seeing that we had our season still ahead of us, and seeing that the offense really had some areas where they could make a big game out of it. Because you saw when they spread the field out more and they played more of a spread rather than the pro style where it's a lot of long developing plays. We were moving the ball a lot better than we were for most of the game. So it gives me a lot of hope for our offense, gives me a lot of optimism for the rest of the season. And it was just an amazing feeling after the game.
Yeah, so I think you hit it really well. The one thing I kind of want to touch on is something that I've seen a lot on Twitter, and I think it's probably circulated the message boards too, and that's kind of the fact that a lot of fans want Texas to move towards more 11 and 10 personnel. And in general, I would agree if it was as simple as we can just play 11 and 10 personnel. Clint, you and I had this conversation about, I think, the Sunday after the game. Some of the reason why Texas doesn't run a lot of 11 personnel or a lot of spread is just because they may not have installed a lot of the spread concepts, right? You don't have all year to install 20 different offenses, and the spread and the way Steve Sarkisian's pro style system work are there's not a whole lot of similarities, right? Because in Sarkisian's system, there's a lot of condensing, there's a lot of motion. It's not very fast. It's very much what you see in the NFL. The spread is a lot more what you'll see in high school, where we're going to play a little bit faster. We're going to use a lot more signals, where we're going to have guys with cue cards and they're holding them above your head. Wide receivers are looking to the sideline. We're gonna get checks with me, where we're gonna line up, and with 30 seconds we're gonna fake clap. We're gonna look over to the sideline and all this different stuff. That's not really something that Texas may have installed over the offseason, where when you're running 2 minute, you're not running a lot of concepts. You're fairly basic in terms of what you're doing. You're just going quick, and it works because it's not a massive sample size. You're not trying to game plan 30 to 70 plays a game. You're really doing it for about 15 to 20. It's a much smaller group of plays that you're working on. And so I think for Texas fans, I do think you're right that it probably should be more spread based. I don't know that it will be, though, because I don't know that they have enough installed in terms of what they can run. So to me, that's kind of something that it's a little bit of a sunk cost, where you realize that, okay, the best system for this offense is the one that we may not be able to see a ton of. So, but it does give you confidence that, hey, we know that there is something that works with this offense. We know that there is a recipe for success that we can use, and that we know that Texas can be productive offensively. I thought Arch Manning was super, super impressive in the fourth quarter, pretty much all game. Honestly, if you watch that tape, they're not giving him a lot of help. The offensive line is still getting beat a lot. There's not a consistent run game. Guys were dropping passes. Ryan Wingo dropped a 3rd and 20 that would have been a first down, and he was wide open. Parker Livingstone basically gave away an interception. He not getting a lot of help, and the way he played, the way he battled, I thought was super impressive. And it was on the road too, and that's probably about as encouraging a sign as you get, because we had talked for a while now how he had really struggled on the road, and that was a really big concern for us. And he goes to Starkville with all the cowbells, and he's down 17, and to see the way he battled, to see the way he played, I thought was super impressive. And it does give you confidence moving forward with him. If it's not this season, which I don't think Texas is going to be a playoff team this year, just being totally honest about that. But it gives you hope for next year and what he can be and what can happen with the roster. So that's obviously something that you're optimistic about for Texas. And then defensively, we talked about this last week. You can't be on the field for more than 80 plays, or else they're going to score on you. And Texas's defense played 93 snaps. So but we talked about it on Tuesday. If you give these air raid systems a lot of snaps, they're going to score a lot of points. And Texas's offense did not help their defense. I wasn't super surprised, especially when I saw how many snaps they'd played. I think you come to expect that they're going to score a lot of points when you're giving up that many snaps. And I think the time of possession in the first half was pretty skewed towards Mississippi State. So those are things that are obviously going to hurt your cause for the Texas defense. I'm not super worried long term about the defense. I think they're going to be fine. It's not something that I'm going to stress too much about. So a must-win game, and they won it. The offense has there's some positives you can take away for sure. Still some stuff that you're going to be really disappointed with. Some stuff that has to get cleaned up. But all in all, a good win for Texas, a must win for Texas, and you saw some growth in some key areas.
Yeah, man, you said that all well. Just touching on the defense real quick. I definitely feel a lot of the issues that we did see with the bus, I think, did have to do with Michael Taff in a sense because, as Sark has stated, Michael Taff is essentially the quarterback of that defense. He's the one who really makes sure everyone's assignments are, or everyone knows their assignments and knows what they're doing. And without him there, and you're having, no matter who you put in, whether it's Derek Williams or you're putting in Xavier Filsaime to fill a spot, they're two guys who have had less than 100 snaps all season, and then they're going into the game and they're being a primary guy. You're going to have a lot of bust in that sense, especially against a Jeff Levy offense who really can take advantage of those with the type of offense he runs the Art Brow style offense, which is a very simple, but it's a very effective offense. So we won't be seeing an air attack like that this next week, which we'll get into later. But you definitely felt his presence being missing that game.
Yeah, I think that sums up the Texas Mississippi State game really well. Moving on to another team that has an air raid system. That's obviously talking about Oklahoma. They hosted Ole Miss. It was an early game, and Oklahoma disappointed. I didn't think they played very well. I know that the score ended up being a one-score game, but I think to anyone watching that, it was pretty clear who the better team was, and it was Ole Miss. I thought offensively, Lane Kiffin outcoached Brent Venables for 4 quarters. Defensively, outside of two busts, I thought they really did a good job of containing John Mateer, and they did a good job of not only stopping the run, but stopping the quarterback run game, which was a real question that I had about Ole Miss. So, a good performance for them. I thought that, to me, I don't know that this gives me a whole lot of new information about Ole Miss because I still saw a lot of busts in the cover in the secondary for Ole Miss. There was that Isaiah Satania touchdown in the second quarter. I want to say they're playing man to man coverage, and there's two separate busts you can ID. One, you can see three guys run with the back, where the back flares out, and there's three guys that are working to him, and that's not how any defense ever works. That is a 3-4 push. That is a safety is going to roll down, and it's one guy rolling down. It's not two safeties. So what ends up happening is it ends up looking like cover zero in a way that it should not. And then on the drag route, the player who's supposed to be guarding Isaiah Satania has his eyes in the backfield playing man coverage, which makes no sense. You're never taught that as a DB. You're never taught that as a linebacker. When you're in man coverage, your eyes stay on the hip of your receiver. They do not lead to the quarterback because what happened on Saturday is what happens when you play with bad eye discipline. So I think that's obviously something that is a concern for me with Ole Miss. And then you still see their linebackers fit the wrong gaps way too often in the run game. Now, it didn't matter on Saturday because point blank period, Ole Miss's D line is just significantly better than the OU O line. But against better teams, that's a real concern. So for me, Ole Miss didn't answer a lot of questions that I had about them, and I'm really not going to get a lot of those answers until we see them in probably the first game of the playoff, which makes me really nervous. And then for Oklahoma, I think this kind of was the end of their season. They still have to go play Tennessee on the road, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. They've got to go play LSU, who will probably be playing some inspired football for their interim. And then they've got to go to Tuscaloosa and play Alabama, who's probably a top 3 team in the country, top 5 team in the country at worst. That's a really tough schedule, and this is an offense that still cannot run the ball, and John Mateer does not look good right now. That's a real problem for them. So I think this game to me kind of just encapsulated that I think Oklahoma's season is done. I think they're no longer a playoff contender. it didn't tell me a whole lot about Ole Miss. Is that the same for you, or what was your takeaways?
Yeah, I actually I want to put one of the comments on the screen, and it does kind of beg a question. The Durag Oko, thanks for watching. He said they played an offense with a pulse and defense got exposed. Um, y- I don't disagree fully because when you look at the teams that they've played that are great offensively, which I would say there's really only I guess it's really only one of them, which is Ole Miss. They gave up 34, but you look at the other games that they've played against Power Four opponents. Michigan, they gave up 13, which Michigan isn't the best offensive team. They played Auburn, who was horrible offensively. They gave up 17, and then you play Texas, give up 23, and play South Carolina, give up 7. So it's not like they've played anybody with a real offensive firepower that the Ole Miss has, to where it makes their defense look better. But I don't know if I would fully agree with that, but also it does kind of beg somewhat of a question in regards to that. But I will say it didn't really change my mind in most senses. I was pretty 50-50 on that game. I picked Oklahoma to win just because of the home field advantage and just from what I'd seen from that defense all year. But obviously, Ole Miss came in, like you said, the score of the game, it doesn't really tell the whole story, and it was a lot closer than the game actually was. When you look at the first half, the time of possession was, I would say, was pretty bad. Oklahoma really only had one drive over 3 minutes, or they had two drives over 3 minutes, but the rest were like three and outs. You had the safety early in that, or somewhat middle of the second quarter, and then at half it's 22-10. Oklahoma gets a couple touchdowns off of busts from Ole Miss's defense, which we've talked about all year. That Xavier Robinson 65-yard touchdown. That's kind of what we've seen from Ole Miss's run defense all year, especially how it just gets exposed and they they don't do well defending the run at all. I thought Trinidad Chambliss played a good game. Um, Completion percentage may not be the best, but I mean he played pretty efficiently the whole game. Kawan Lacey had a decent game. And then from Oklahoma side, John Mateer, he hasn't looked anywhere near like he did before that thumb injury. And then Xavier Robinson had a good decent game, but also those yards are skewed by that one big run that he had. So overall, I think it was a really good win from Ole Miss. To your point too, with Oklahoma's remaining schedule, it probably is the end of their season because their next four games at Tennessee, then you go to Tuscaloosa, which those games back to back, if you win those, I'd be shocked. And then you play Missouri, who they're not going to be what they've been the whole season without Pribula, even though he hasn't been the best. And then you have LSU, who you don't know what they're going to be under Frank Wilson. So it definitely did end their season, in my opinion. Ole Miss, they still are very much in the playoff race. I think they will make the playoffs, but it didn't change my opinion much, and kind of happened the way I expected it to happen. I just thought for Oklahoma it would be in their favor.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll say is I don't know that I fully agree with like the defense is overrated part. The time of possession was pretty skewed in favor of Ole Miss, and I think that plays a role. I think also you got to remember who the coordinator for Ole Miss is and who the coach is. It's a top three offensive mind in the sport. It's one of the few offensive coordinators who has a really, really intimate knowledge of what teams are trying to do defensively. And I think that's something that people often forget when they talk about Lane Kiffin and what makes him so good. So I think to me it's more about Ole Miss. You look at what they've done to SEC defenses, right? They put up 35 against Georgia. They've now put up 34 against Ole Miss. I think it might be more of a reflection about Ole Miss than it may be on Oklahoma's defense, who I think is still good. We talked about the 23 points against Texas. We have to remember that 7 of those came from a punt return. And I don't think they're a top 5 defense in the country. I'm not sure they're a top 3 defense in the SEC, but I think they're still a really good one. I think they do I think they give a lot of teams a lot of problems. So I don't necessarily disagree that they're overrated. I just don't, I think to the extent of which they're overrated is pretty minimized. And then I think that's pretty much all I have about this game. If you got nothing else, we can move on to the hammering that A&M put on LSU in Death Valley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, I agree with you. I was just stating that you could have a discussion about
Yeah,
that with given what happened.
yeah, no doubt. There was no discussion about who the better team was Saturday night when LSU and A&M played. Even in the first half, after LSU was up, I think it was 21-18 at the half. I don't think it might have been. I might have that wrong. It might have been 18-14.
It was 18-14.
Yeah. Uh, I don't think there was ever really a doubt who the better team was. LSU could not get stops. The two stops that they did get in the first half were a terrible interception by Marcel Reed in the red zone, and then a batted ball that Harold Perkins ended up intercepting. But outside of that, LSU one could not protect Garrett Nussmeier once again. Cassius Howell annihilated both tackles, and then on the flip side, they couldn't stop a running quarterback once again. Marcel Reed's legs were a massive problem for them, and they never really felt like defensively LSU was comfortable with what A&M was throwing at them offensively. I think after the first half, after it was only 18-14, you kind of got the feeling that A&M was going to be able to pull away in this game, just because for it to only be 18-14 after A&M turned it over twice, you do start to feel a little bit concerned. And then the second half was about as embarrassing as it gets for LSU. I think they got outscored something like 39-7, or 31-7. It was 30. They scored 31 straight points unanswered. It was not great. It got to the point where Garrett Nussmeier actually got pulled, and they put in Michael Van Buren late in that game. And I think that probably sums up about what happened. It was a complete domination from A&M, and a really good performance from them.
No, dude. I mean, you kind of touched on it perfectly. There's really not much to look into this game. It was just a pure beatdown, just a classic go into their stadium and take over their environment. Big piece of that was the Aggie receivers, what we've seen all year, Concepcion and Craver. Just like David said right here, Aggies receivers are elite. Thanks for watching Gig on Bark. Thanks for watching Aggie Zone Louisiana. I mean, from what we saw yesterday, they do. I mean, yeah, you saw LSU have the lead at the half, which with how that first half was going, it was honestly a shock that they were up. But you had that one interception from Marcel Reed right on the goal line. And then you also had the other one where the ball got tipped up. And I mean, LSU was able to capitalize on a couple of those. They got that blocked punt for the safety. But once the second half started, it was all Ags. Once I think the play that really ended the game was when Casey Conception returned that punt for a touchdown, because LSU was already struggling to move the ball the entire game. And for you to be down 2 scores in the second half, I didn't see any way possible for them to come back. And as you said earlier, Aggies get 35 unanswered points after that first half and make it 49-18. And then right at the very end, Michael Van Buren comes in. Not Michael Van Buren. Michael Van Buren comes in and gets a touchdown late. But other than that, it was just a pure beatdown. It was a very ugly game to watch, especially if you're an LSU fan. It's not something that gives you much hope for the rest of the season, which granted they have an interim coach, which we'll get into after this. But it was just a bad game overall from LSU in every facet. A&M's defense, I thought, played pretty good, or not pretty good, very good. Cassius Howell, again, having a dominating performance as he has the past couple of weeks. And then A&M's ability to really lock down that passing game just helped them a lot. I think LSU should have probably stuck with the run game a little bit more than they did, but other than that, I don't think that would have changed much in the game, to be honest.
Yeah, I talked about this at some point I had a couple conversations about this with some people, and I mentioned it to you. To me, this Aggie team feels a lot like the 2023 Washington team. And I don't mean that in terms of style of play or how good they are. I mean it in terms of how they dictate the game flow and what they do to teams. So very similar to how 2023 Washington, when if you let them score early, it felt like a snowball effect where everything felt so sped up for your offense, where now you feel like you've got to play fast and you've got to score and you've got to be able to keep up with them, that you start to play like you're down multiple scores, where it feels like you're just trying to fight and scratch to keep in the game. So you end up abandoning the run game, and you start being pass heavy. And this is especially what you saw in the second half from LSU, where in the first half they ran the ball really, really well. And the second half, on their first two drives, I think they ran it a total of one time. And this is what I'm talking about, where they really speed you up. They make the game feel way faster than it is. And they have that 2023 Washington effect, where it reminds me a lot of that 2023 semifinal, where Texas ran the ball really, really well, but they didn't run it super often because of the way that they got sped up and the way the game flow was, where it felt like they were always trying to catch up and they were always trying to keep pace with Washington. That's what I feel like a lot when I watch A&M is teams are trying to play to their speed and they're not able and they're not settling into their offense where teams are almost doing too much. They're trying to do too much and they're not staying patient and they're not staying with the game plan. And I think that's a lot of credit to the A&M offense because it makes the defense look a lot better than they are. Because truth be told, I don't think it is an elite defense. I think it's fine. I think I think you can absolutely run the ball on them. LSU could not run the ball all year, and in the first half, there were two running backs averaged almost 8 yards a carry. Right? It's not like A&M. It's not like A&M in the first half shut the run game down. We saw Arkansas run the ball on them. Notre Dame is running the ball on them. I don't necessarily think this is a great run game. And then in the coverage standpoint, they are going to play a ton of press man, and so I think you can do some things to win there. They are a bit susceptible to the deep ball. We've seen Des Ricks get beat a couple of times over the past three games. We saw this with Florida, especially where I believe he actually got pulled for Julian Humphrey in that game. And so that speaks to my point that their offense helps their defense. They play super complementary football. They don't need to be elite defensively because their offense helps them out so much. Their offense puts them in a lot of really good positions, and that matters more than having something like Texas, where they may have a great defense, but their offense doesn't help them out. And so you're only as good as the sum of your parts. And when the sum of your parts are helping each other out, when they're doing a good job of putting you in advantageous positions, I think you end up being a really good football team. And I think that's what A&M is.
That was said perfectly right there, especially with your comparison to the 2023 Washington team. The offense absolutely helps that defense out because when you're able to keep your defense off the field, especially in games where you're playing a team that's not great offensively, and you're able to hold the ball for a long time, take a lot of time off the clock, and really move the ball effectively and tire out their defense, it's going to be a lot better game for you. Whereas you said with Texas, we do have an elite defense. We have a top five defense in the country, in my opinion. And yeah, you could argue number one in the SEC, but when you're out there on the field for like in the Kentucky game for 40 minutes, at some point they're human too. They're going to wear down. They're going to get tired, and they're not going to be as effective as they were early in the game. So A&M overall, they just play very complementary football in every facet, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams. They just play almost every game like a complete team.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think that's probably the biggest compliment you can give them is outside of maybe Ohio State and Indiana, they play the most complete football in general. And I think that that wins you national titles. I don't know that I would say A&M is a national title contender until I see them consistently stop the run. But I don't know how many teams you can say are true title contenders. And in years like this, I think what I'm going to learn and what a lot of people are going to learn is teams that may have flaws are still very much title contenders. And that might just be the new norm. And so with that in mind, it might be true that A&M is a title contender despite the run defense simply because a lot of teams have different flaws. And so that to me was the main takeaway is I may have to change my perspective of who a title contender is, and A&M very well might be one.
No, I completely agree. I think, like you said, they're one of the most complete teams in the country right now, and they play like that every game. And this is one of those years where you're kind of starting to see the effect from the transfer portal really, really immerse when there are a lot of teams that I don't think there's really any fully complete teams. Every team has their issues in some facet of the game. You very rarely nowadays are going to have a team like what those USC teams under Pete Carroll, like that Miami team in 2001, where they're just like a complete team in every facet of the game.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums the game up really well, and we can talk about the other side of that game, which is LSU, and more specifically, the aftermath of that game. Obviously, Brian Kelly was fired. I think late, kind of late evening, late afternoon, Sunday. Um, what'd you make of the firing? Did you think it was the right move? Did you have any immediate thoughts after the firing?
So when the game ended and you saw some reports come out about possible changes, and you start to see the governor of the state get involved, talking about he tagged the LSU football team account and was talking about, hey, maybe we should reconsider upping the ticket prices if this is the product we're going to see on the field. When you have the governor of your state getting involved like that and trashing your football program, that's not anything good, and you can't make anything good of that. And you kind of saw the writing on the wall at the beginning of this season. You saw a lot of LSU fans and LSU media talking about playoff or bust this year, especially with the expectations they had in the preseason. And I thought that it was inevitable. I thought whether it was going to be after the game, whether it was going to be at the end of the season, I thought this was going to be Brian Kelly's last year. I think it kind of was solidified after Vanderbilt, especially. Even though they're a great team, losing to Vanderbilt still has that stigma of a very nasty taste in your mouth after the fact. And I myself admittedly, I'm not someone who's a real big fan of firing midseason, just because it can lead to I think it leads to recruiting issues. I think it gives chances for kids to flip. Whereas, like, if you wait towards the end of the season and towards signing day, you can lock those recruits in and still find a new head coach. But I also understand the point of view from starting the coaching search early to getting your candidates a lot earlier than waiting till the end of the season and possibly having your guy picked out before the end of the season. So I think it's a double-sided coin with that, where there's the good and the bads of it. But I'm not the biggest fan of a midseason firing, but I saw it coming, and I think overall firing him was the right move.
Yeah, I think I had the same take after the James Franklin firing. If you know you're going to fire him after the season and you have the money to do it, just get it done, because you now have the opportunity to spend the next month or two vetting candidates and really going through a proper coaching search. I don't think it makes any sense to carry dead weight with you, especially not when you're going to enter into a super competitive coaching candidate pool where there's not a lot of guys who you're going to go after, and a lot of the teams that are looking for coaches are looking at the same guys, and you don't want to be on the back foot where you're entering 2 months after someone else and you're being forced to then try to make up ground with these guys. So I think it was the right move to fire Brian Kelly. I think that, especially if you knew Saturday night that you wanted to fire him, if you had the money, you should do so. And I think they did the right thing by doing that, which can then bring us to our next talking point, which is, if you're LSU, who is on top of that candidate list? Who do you think that they should look at? Who are some underrated names that they should look at? And then what do you think that they ultimately end up doing?
So this has been probably the hardest thought process when it comes to coaching searches out of all the teams, because Florida, you kind of have a candidate that everyone kind of has a consensus on who will be the future head coach, with being Lane Kiffin, which obviously nothing is set in stone, nothing is for sure yet, but that seems to be the big consensus answer right there. With LSU, there are a couple of names that stick out to me. I think one of those guys is in the state of Louisiana with John Summerall at Tulane. He's one of those guys who has been a very big name when it comes to all these different coaching searches with these Power Four programs. He's done great at Tulane. He's done great really anywhere he's been. And he seems like a guy who can really elevate a program. Other names, you have Eli Drinkwitz. I think he would be a good coach. You saw what he did at Mizzou after Barry Odom was let go, and how he really elevated them to winning a Cotton Bowl, to consistently fighting for 10-win seasons. Jeff Brom, you've talked about it before. You think he's a great coach. I think he's a really good coach with what he did at Purdue, with what he's done at Louisville. And then some other names that you could throw in there that I don't necessarily see happening, but obviously there's some connection there. You have Joe Brady, who was once the offensive coordinator at LSU, who was the real reason that they won that national championship in 2019 when he came in and he really elevated that offense from the very outdated offense they ran before that. You have James Franklin, who is still doesn't have a job anymore. Obviously, got fired from Penn State. He did pretty good at Penn State through all his years, but I don't see that happening. And then one more name. I mean, maybe Brent Key, but also I don't see him leaving there. But I think my top three candidates would be John Summerall, Eli Drinkwitz, and Jeff Brom.
Yeah, and so just to really quickly touch on something that I think is obviously true, it's just that the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes have obviously changed now that LSU has opened. I think that that will be a job that is going to go both. It could go either way, whether Lane Kiffin decides to go to LSU or Florida. If you ask me, I would still bet Florida, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. But outside of Kiffin, I think the names that they should be looking at is John Summerall, obviously from the state, understands the culture of it, understands what it means to be a Louisiana man, and understands what's required there. Has good connections in the state, so I think he'd recruit there really well. And he's also one of these guys who, as a defensive coordinator, he's going to be super obsessed with the process. He's gonna maximize every little thing to make sure that LSU maximizes their ceiling, and LSU's ceiling is just as high as everyone else's in the country. So I think that's a guy that I would be really, really interested in them going after. And then outside of that, I think Jeff Brom would be a really good hire. I think I've said this for a very long time. I think Glenn Schumann would be a really, really good hire. That's a guy who's spent now almost half of his life in the Saban family. He's learned from the two best head coaches of the past 20 years, and that's Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. He's widely revered by people in coaching circles as one of the smartest defensive minds in the entire sport of football, including the NFL. So I don't. He's a monster recruiter. If you look at what he's done with the linebackers in Georgia, he's done a tremendous job. He's a great developer. So I think that to me would be a guy that I would be super interested in them going after. And then after that, it becomes a wide net of candidates. Where if it's not one of those guys, maybe it's Kenny Dillingham if they can pull him from Arizona State. Maybe it's Brent Key if they can pull him from Georgia Tech. Maybe it's Jeff Brom. Maybe it's insert blank name. Maybe it's someone from the NFL, Kelvin Shepard, Joe Brady, anyone, right? There's a lot of different people it can be. It's a very wide search. So I don't know that also very early in the search, right? The job opened up 2 days ago. There's a long time until they hire someone. In all likelihood, I know that they've said, and it's been well reported that they want to have a candidate by the end of November. I'm not sure that'll happen, especially not with some of the guys that they're going to be in on who are going to be playoff contenders and likely in the playoff. I'm not so sure that they would be willing to accept a job when they don't know how their season is going to end. I just don't think that's going to happen. So that's obviously something to consider. And then just going into the Lane Kiffin thing, because I think that's obviously where everyone's going to start. And when you're comparing LSU and Florida jobs, I think in general, LSU is the best job available on the market. It's arguably a top 5 job in the entire country. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a significantly better job than Florida. In fact, I think they're pretty damn similar. I think you could make an argument either way. LSU to me is the better job just because of recent success. And outside of Brian Kelly, in the 20th century, every single coach that's been there has won a national title, and that does matter, even if all of it was pre-NIL. But to me, the reason why I think Lane Kiffin would pick Florida over LSU is twofold. One, I think the argument for why Lane Kiffin is going to leave Ole Miss has two arguments baked into it, which is one, resources, and two, just sentimental value. And so if Lane Kiffin, let's just say, at the end of this year they go 11-1 and they make a run into the semifinals of the playoffs, if it's about winning, I don't know why you would leave Ole Miss, because you've now shown that you can win at Ole Miss, and if you sign a contract extension, you're basically assuring that you're going to get full support from the boosters to where you can go after and get the best high school kids, and you can go in and get whoever you want out of the portal. You can build a real contender year in and year out. And so from that standpoint, I'm not sure why you would go to LSU at that point. Now, the argument for Florida has always been about the sentimental value behind the job. He's said it multiple times that Florida and Gainesville in particular is a special place for him. His reconciled ex-wife went there. His father-in-law was a Gator legend, is in the Gator Hall of Fame. That's John Reeves. He was born in Tampa. His dad was a defensive coordinator there. He's got a lot of ties to that state. He obviously loves the state. So to me, the thing with the Florida job is not so much that it's a better job than LSU. I don't think it is. I think it's the sentimental value and the fact that there's not a huge discrepancy between LSU and Florida, but he has a lot more connections to the state of Florida. And so if he wins at LSU the way I think he is going, if he wins at Ole Miss this season the way I think he will, where he's going to win at least a playoff game, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense for him to go to LSU, because that's the reason to go to LSU is if this season ends poorly. Say they lose to Florida in 2 weeks and then they lose to Mississippi State and they're not in a playoff game. Well, then you can't win at Ole Miss. It makes all of the sense in the world to go to LSU or Florida, where there's more resources, and especially at LSU, where you're the top dog in that state, and that is a state that will give you everything. And so it makes sense to go to LSU in that context where maybe the season doesn't end the way you want it to, and you know that you're going to have ultimate resources at LSU. But again, I don't know that the difference in resources between LSU and Florida is a big enough deal to offset the emotional connection that is there. And so I think that's obviously something to consider when we're talking about that, when we're talking about Lane Kiffin and what job he's going to accept. I wouldn't be surprised either way, which way he goes. Right now, I've heard a lot of people say, and a lot of people through back channels are saying it sounds like it's going to be Florida, but I know LSU feels really confident. I know that they're going to make a really big swing at him. And again, it's very early in the process, so things can immediately change. I'm not going to say it'll go one way or the other. It could go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised. Either way, I think both Florida and LSU are going to end up with really, really good candidates. I don't think either one of them is necessarily going to hit home runs. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Florida hires Jed Fish and LSU ends up with Summerall. I think that is kind of how the modern day college football landscape works, where guys are maybe a little bit more hesitant to leave than prior.
Yeah, man. You said it all very good. I really don't have too much more to add to this, to be honest. I'm obviously not as knowledgeable in this sense as you are. I don't have the information to, so I think I'll leave it all on that.
Yeah, I think we've kind of talked about it all anyway. I know that we have a couple LSU buddies that wanted us to talk about the job. I think it's one of the best in the country. It's one of the top 7, top 8. I don't know that it'll be Kiffin, but I know it'll be a really good coach from somewhere, and we'll kind of see what ends up happening. We've spent a decent amount of time on that, so we're going to move on now. We're going to be talking about some of the games this weekend. And funny enough, we're going to start with Florida. They're obviously playing in the world's largest cocktail bowl against Georgia. It'll be at 2:30 on ABC. I'm super intrigued in this matchup. I I think to me it's going to answer a lot of questions about Georgia in particular, because we I in particular had talked to you about how Georgia's faced two good defenses all year. They faced two defenses inside the top 50, and those were Alabama and Auburn. And so when you look at those two in conjugation with each other and you look at what they averaged 20.5 points in that game. They averaged under 350 yards. And now they're going to play another top 50 defense. I think this will tell you a lot about that Georgia offense because they played really well against Tennessee. They played really well against Ole Miss, but neither of those defenses are very good, and Florida's is. So this is going to be a really big test for them, and I think it'll answer a lot of questions about them on offense. And then on the other side of the ball, I've got a couple keys to the matchup that I'll get into after I get your preliminary thoughts.
Yeah, so this game is very interesting to me. Just for one, in the sense you're going to be having a Florida team who will be playing their first game without their head coach Billy Napier. I believe the interim is Billy Gonzalez, if I'm right, or I could be
Yep.
wrong.
No,
Okay,
you're right.
so Billy Gonzalez will be leading them this Saturday. I think, like you stated, it's a very interesting matchup because Georgia really hasn't played too many top defenses, at least all year. And the two that they played against Alabama, they got 21. But for most of that game, their offense was really stifled, especially in the first half. And then you have Auburn, who they only get 20 points. And just like the Alabama game, their offense was stifled for most of that game. So it will be really interesting to see how Florida's defense is able to hold Georgia, how Georgia's offense is able to counter that very good Florida defense. And I think that's where the matchup is going to lie. I don't really have too much faith in Florida's offense with DJ Lagway because other than the Texas game, he really hasn't looked that great all year against any SEC opponents. And that offense has just been really struggling to move the ball in any sense and has just been kind of getting in their own way and shooting themselves in the foot. So I think for Florida, it's going to be limit the mistakes, limit the costly turnovers, the costly penalties, and just play clean football on offense, and then just do what your defense has been doing all year. For Georgia, just score early, score better in the first half than you have all year. Do better in the first half with your offense because that's where they've really struggled is really getting the ball moving and making ground in that first half. So I think it will be a close game even without Billy Napier. I think it will, at least for the first half, be very close. I wouldn't be shocked if Florida was leading at half, but I think at the end of the day, I think Georgia will win the game. I think I just find it hard to really pick a team who is without a head coach and has not been doing great all year versus a top 5 team and a team that's led by Kirby Smart. So those are my preliminary thoughts. I'm going to give a score of about 27-17 for Georgia. But yeah, I think I have Georgia winning that game, and I feel very confident about that.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I'll quickly as fast as I can go through my 3 keys to the matchup and then give my prediction. So for one, I'll start with Florida when they're on offense. Can they sustain drives? What you've seen from Georgia a lot this year is they really struggle to get off the field on third down, but they don't give up a lot of explosives. And so is DJ Lagway going to be patient? Can he consistently hit the hitch on first down? Can he take what is there? Can Florida get into situations where they're in second and manageable, third and manageable, or they're not in third and 10 and DJ Lagway feels like he has to force it and press it because we've seen when he tries to do that, he turns the ball over. And you cannot do this against Georgia. If you turn the ball over against Georgia, a team that does not cause a lot of turnovers, you will give their offense some free points, and you cannot do that in these types of matchups. So that's key number 1. And then the key number 2, can Georgia get Florida out of nickel? Because when Georgia's in 12 personnel, you will see Florida initially line up in nickel. They'll play a 4-2-5. If Georgia can run the ball well enough to force Florida out of their nickel package and into their base 3-4, I think the game flips on its head, and I think Georgia is going to have a ton of success. But if Georgia can't run the ball when Florida is in nickel, I think they will be in a world of hurt because Florida is going to be able to run whatever they want. They're going to be able to run all of the different creepers that we saw against Texas, where when you get into condensed splits, Ron Roberts likes to bring external pressures, whether that's a corner blitz, whether that's a nickel blitz, whether that's bringing a safety from depth, bringing a linebacker from the edge. They do a lot of different things to you if you let them. But if you can force them out of base, they're going to have to play cover 3. They're going to have to be single high. They're going to have to focus on stopping the run, and you can have some success against those corners when they're in single high. So that's my second key. And then my third key is can 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 Florida hit enough explosives? Because if Florida can hit a couple deep shots with Dallas Wilson and with Trey Wilson and with Vernell Brown, they might only need 24 points if they don't turn the ball over. Because their defense is good enough to hold Georgia to under 20, to under 21, to under 24. I think they can do that. And so, can they muster enough explosives to get to that mark? Because on a down to down, drive to drive rate, I don't think they will. And so, for all those reasons, I don't think they're going to hit enough explosives. So, I'll take Georgia to win, and I'll take them to win 24-13. And so, Clint, you've already gave your prediction. We're going to move on now. We're running a little bit late. We're going to touch on OU Tennessee. This game is in Knoxville. I think this game is very simple for me. I think Tennessee's offense will have some success. I think they'll hit some explosives against Oklahoma, which has been susceptible to giving up some explosives. And because I don't trust that Oklahoma offense, I don't trust their O line, I'm going to take Tennessee to win.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Tennessee, their offense really hasn't missed a beat other than that Bama game. Their offense has been very explosive in every game that they've played. Oklahoma, their offense hasn't really been catching their stride since that thumb surgery. I think if there's any game for Mateer to come back and have a good game, it'd be against Tennessee with how very porous and bad their defense is. But either way, I think Tennessee's offensive explosiveness will um, it will be more uh, their offense. Tennessee's offense will it'll be more valuable in the game than Oklahoma's defense, and I think that they'll outwork their defense. So I have Tennessee winning. I'm gonna have it about a score of 37-24. I don't think it'll be very close towards the end of the game. I think it'll be a 2-score game. I have Tennessee winning this game.
Yeah, I think that's probably about as brief as we need to be with that game. I think OU, especially after that loss last week, I'm not sure that this is the game. This is not the game to get right. So I'm. I think we pretty much summed that up really well. And so now we can talk about what is probably the biggest game of the week, and that's going to be Texas versus Vanderbilt. I think the first thing that we've got to talk about is obviously Arch Manning is going to be out. He's got a concussion. No, it was a pretty. He was knocked out cold. They're not going to risk him unless he is absolutely 100% good. I would be shocked if he plays on Saturday. I think it'll be Matthew Caldwell, and so that's the first. That's the first thing that you have to talk about with this game is the fact that Texas isn't going to have their starting quarterback.
Yeah, as we saw on Saturday when Arch Manning went down on that first play of overtime, you saw his face when the camera zoomed in that his eyes were almost in the back of his head. He was seeing stars out there. He just wasn't. He was very concussed. That's just the best way I can put it. And when you have a concussion, the rule of thumb medically is to have them out 10 days since the last headache. Obviously, you and I talked that a lot of teams will kind of rush that process and they won't necessarily go through that complete time frame. But either way, Matthew Caldwell is going to play. I will find it very, very shocking if Arch Manning will be playing. And I think, honestly, it's better for us in this game if Matthew Caldwell is playing as Arch. It's very unlikely that Arch will ever be through the full concussion protocol within just a week. So it will make the game a lot more interesting as you will probably see a different type of offense ran rather than what we have seen with Arch. Whereas Matthew Caldwell, just in time. David said, how will UT's offense play calling change with Caldwell? So with Caldwell, he's very successful in a lot of the RPO type plays to where he's very good at getting the ball out quick. He's very good at reading defenses on those plays. So I think you might see a lot more of some of what we saw with Quinn Ewers last year, where it's a lot more quick game, a lot more screens, and just not many long developing plays. So you might see an offense like that from last year. Obviously, we'll find out when we get to game day, but I think that Matthew Caldwell being in the game, it doesn't really change my confidence in the result of this game very much. I think that in the time that he's played, he's been very good. Granted, he's been in Florida, he went in one play, And then against Mississippi State, he went in a couple plays with only throwing one pass, and the rest were in garbage time versus a group of 5 opponents. But either way, he has starting experience. He started at Troy, and I think he started at FCS schools too, but I could be wrong with that. Either way, I'm very confident in him. I'm very confident that he'll get the job done. I think a very big key for this game is being able to stop Vanderbilt. We saw last week with Missouri's defense, they were able to stop Vanderbilt's offense very well. They were able to hold them to only 17 points, if I'm correct, and they did a very good job of just blowing up what they want to do offensively. Vanderbilt offensively, they like to do they like to get very creative in the run game. They like to do a lot of different types of things, and you're gonna have to really do good at stopping Pavia's legs and his arm, because his arm has improved since last year. But I don't think that's an offense that's really going to blow your socks off. They're not going to be an offense that's really going to up the score on you too much if you have a really good defense. So I have very good confidence in Texas. I think that it'll be a very good game. I think Texas will pull away late. I will have the game at a 27-17 score. I think that Matthew Caldwell will play very well. I think that his experience will show through. And I think that we'll play a very good game overall. I think Derek Williams and Phil Simon will play better having that full game experience that they did Saturday. And I'm very excited to see us hopefully beat a top 10 team for the first time this year in Austin.
Yeah, I think you said it all really well. So to me, I'll talk about Vandy's defense first, and then I'll touch more on some of the specifics with Matthew Caldwell and the Texas offense, which I thought you summarized really well. So I'm not going to have a ton to add there. So defensively for Texas, it starts with how do you handle Vanderbilt's run game? It's one of the more creative in the SEC because of Diego Pavia. You'll see some triple option in there. You'll see some duo. You'll see some split zone. And then obviously, like we talked about last week, they have a strong side of their offensive line and a quick side of their offensive line, where their strong side is more their better run blockers and their quick side is the better pass blockers. They force you to communicate a lot. That's why you tend to see them have explosives where teams are misaligned, or maybe they've got a guy maybe they've got a pass rusher who's 240 on the strong side and they get buried by the tackle, and now that B gap is open because the 240-pound edge rusher got sealed off. And so you got to be careful with that stuff. You got to communicate really well if you're the Texas defensive line. You've got to make sure that you're aligned well, and your linebackers have to do a good job of fitting the run and knowing what you're looking at. That's step one. If you do that, I feel pretty confident about your chances to hold them to minimal points, because the passing attack is not a prolific one. It's not a passing attack that you fear very much. If you go and you look at Diego Pavia's passing yards against Alabama, against LSU, against Missouri, it's not the most impressive thing in the world. He's not lighting it up. And so if you stop the run, you kind of stop what Vanderbilt wants to do. And that's all it is defensively. Is you got to make sure that you're playing with good gap control. You're making sure that your eyes aren't in the wrong spot. You're fitting it correctly. And if you stop all of that, I feel confident in the Texas defense. And then offensively, Vanderbilt's a really tough opponent to play. They're not the biggest team, but they're really quick. They have a bunch of excellent movers. None of them have any wasted steps. They do a great job of playing with team speed. I said this a few days ago to you. I think Vanderbilt has tremendous team speed. They close the ball really quick. They get to the ball. They've got a grit. They don't miss a lot of tackles. They do a good job of rallying to the football. So this is a good defensive team. And I think with Matthew Caldwell, you're going to see a lot more quick game. Now, I'd been hammering that this needs to be a focal point for the offense, and I think part of the reason it's not is just what Arch Manning wants to do. Arch Manning is a guy who wants to hunt explosives a lot more. He wants to throw the ball 20 yards down the field. He's not necessarily someone who wants to take a 10-yard hitch, who wants to take a 5-yard slant, who wants to take a stop route, whereas Matthew Caldwell is a lot more of that. He's a guy who wants to be a little bit more Quinn Ewers, where he's getting the ball in space to his playmakers and letting them do a lot of the work, and he's just trying to get the ball out quick. And so I think you'll see an offense that is somewhat similar to what last year was this weekend. I think that Texas should play well. I don't know that they're going to be able to run the ball, but I think the pass game will have some success. And I think, especially in the Vanderbilt secondary, they have a tendency to be grabby. You can see them a lot of the times where they get beat, they'll reach out. They are susceptible to getting beat. So that's something to watch for. I'm with you in terms of my score prediction. I think Texas is going to win. I don't think it'll be by double digits, though. I think it'll be something like 20-14, a close game that Texas's defense gets a stop in late, somewhat similar to last year where they win a close game that isn't as close as the score would indicate, where Texas is in control of the game, but they aren't able to put the one or two scoring possessions they need to fully close out the game.
Yeah, you said all that very well. I wouldn't be shocked by that outcome either, just because Vandy is a team that they have a lot of fight in them, and they will play you to the very last minute. They'll make you work for everything that you get. So either way, I wouldn't be shocked by that. And David, he gave a score prediction of 24-17. I think that's a pretty good score prediction. But like I said, I think the offense will do very good. Obviously, there will be some bumps in there, as Vanderbilt has given every team that they've played offensively somewhat of a challenge. So, just very excited for the game. Very excited to be back in DKR, and hopefully we can come out this win and go into the bye week with a very positive win against a top 10 team, and then from there, in 2 weeks, we will be playing our hardest game of the season, arguably, going into Athens, but we'll get to that when the time comes.
Yeah. So that's it for us. We gave our score predictions. Feel free to drop yours in the comments. Going to be a really good game, hopefully, for Texas fans. Make sure to make DKR a hostile environment. First time in almost a month and a half that Texas is back in DKR. Sure to be a rocking environment. So go support the Longhorns. We really appreciate you guys for being here. Please like, comment, subscribe, and do all the different things to help the channel. A lot of great content on here. Like I say every week, you get covered in pretty much every conference and every sport. It's the place to be.